Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really cool. We're going to trace Rome's dramatic evolution from a republic to an autocratic empire. But we aren't just going to look at the historical figures or the wars. Instead, we're going to track this massive political shift through the physical structures that controlled it. Because as you'll see, the buildings the Romans left behind tell an incredible story of power, manipulation, and unparalleled engineering.
Here's our roadmap for the journey. We'll start in the Roman Forum, look at the fall of the Republic, and then dive into building the Colosseum, engineering the spectacle, and finally, exploring its missing half.
Okay, Section 1, the Roman Forum, the heart of the Republic. To really understand the Basilica Aemilia, you first have to understand exactly where it was. It wasn't tucked away on some quiet side street, right? It stood on the northeast edge of the Roman Forum, the absolute symbolic and political center of the Roman world. Imagine a valley between the Palatine and Capitoline Hills, acting as a nation's capital, its highest courts, financial district, and main public square all rolled into one. Triumphal processions for victorious generals literally snaked their way down the Via Sacra, the main artery that ran right past the front steps of this building. And its placement tells you everything about its purpose. This wasn't for quiet contemplation. Even before the basilica was built, this exact spot was a chaotic hub for the Argentaria, the city's money changers and bankers. So when the censors Marcus Fulvius Nobilior and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus constructed this massive building in 179 BCE, they weren't creating something totally new. They essentially just built a roof over the existing chaos. They created a controlled, indoor extension of the Forum so the loud, messy, and absolutely vital business of running a republic could continue, rain or shine.
And just a stone's throw from where the 600 senators debated in the Curia, you'd find the rostra. This was a high speakers platform literally decorated with the iron bows of captured enemy warships. Talk about a power move. This is where legendary politicians like Cicero delivered fiery speeches to sway the public. And while they spoke, just imagine the sheer sensory overload around them. You'd hear a constant symphony of urban life, 1,000 conversations happening in 12 different languages, the impassioned pleas of a lawyer, the sharp clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the loud pronouncements of a magistrate ringing out over the crowds.
Now, amidst all that sweat from the jostling crowds and the aromas of nearby food stalls, the air would have also been thick with sweet incense drifting from the nearby temple of Vesta. And this perfectly captures how the Republic blended civic and religious life. Inside this round temple, 6 Vestal virgins tended to Rome's eternal fire. The belief was literal. As long as that fire burned, the Roman state was immortal. It was this incredibly intricate, perfectly balanced system of shared power, public debate, and religious unity. Which brings us to Section 2, the fall of the Republic, crossing the Rubicon. But, that balanced system of shared senatorial power just couldn't last forever. It eventually crumbled under the massive weight of Rome's own unprecedented military expansion across the Mediterranean. The real turning point, the exact moment the Republic effectively died, was when Julius Caesar famously declared the die is cast. He crossed the Rubicon River and marched his own army right into his hometown. That one aggressive move completely shattered the old balance of power, setting the stage for dictatorship and eventually the absolute rule of the imperial emperors.
So, this creates a fascinating and honestly terrifying problem for the new emperors. With a Senate stripped of its centuries-old supreme authority, how do you actually control an empire? Specifically, how do you manage a massive, diverse, and incredibly restless population right there in the capital? They desperately needed a way to appease and distract the masses without giving them a single ounce of actual political power.
And that leads perfectly into Section 3, building the Colosseum, a gift to the people. To solve this ultimate problem of control, Emperor Vespasian pulled off what might be the greatest public relations stunt in history. He needed to legitimize his new rule and completely erase the despised legacy of his predecessor, the tyrant Nero, who had selfishly built this massive golden palace right in the center of Rome. So what does Vespasian do? He symbolically drains Nero's private artificial lake, gives that prime real estate back to the public, and builds a massive 50,000-seat amphitheater in less than a decade. It was the absolute ultimate gift of bread and circuses to guarantee the public's loyalty.
Let's look at how this actually worked in Section 4, engineering the spectacle, architecture of control. Because the Colosseum wasn't just a big building, it was an unprecedented, highly tuned machine of entertainment. And you can really see the shift in architectural philosophy here. Think about ancient Greek theaters. They were usually built gently into natural mountain slopes, open and looking out over the beautiful landscape. But the Romans, they used their absolute mastery of concrete to break free from nature entirely.
They built this freestanding, enclosed megastructure and literally slammed it right into the heart of the city center. By enclosing the space a full 360 degrees, they created an isolated world entirely disconnected from the outside, where the emperor was the absolute, undeniable center of attention.
And once you were inside, those 50,000 spectators definitely didn't just sit wherever they felt like it. Seating was strictly, rigidly segregated by class. If you look at the layout, the bottom tier was reserved for senators. Move up and you get the knights, then the plebeians, and finally, all the way at the top in the cheap wooden seats, were women and slaves. It was a physical, vertical map of Roman hierarchy. Going to the games was a brilliantly orchestrated way to reinforce exactly where you stood in society. Sure, you were there to watch the bloodshed, but make no mistake, you were also there to be watched. But the real magic, the stuff that kept that massive crowd completely captivated, was happening right beneath their feet. Underneath the sand of the arena floor was the hypogeum. This was a sweaty, dark, and incredibly complex labyrinth of tunnels and holding cells. Down there, slaves operated these massive wooden capstans and elevators to hoist gladiators, elaborate scenery, and hundreds of exotic wild animals up through hidden trapdoors. To the crowd above, a lion or a bear would seemingly just pop out of thin air. The shock value was just off the charts.
And the engineering genius didn't stop at the floor. It went all the way up to the roof. I mean, think about it. The blistering Roman summer sun beating down on a white stone arena for hours? Unbearable. So to keep the massive crowd comfortable all day, the Romans engineered the velarium. This was a gigantic, retractable canvas awning suspended high over the audience. And here's the craziest part. Because rigging it up was so much like managing the massive sails of a ship, it was actually operated by sailors drafted directly from the Imperial Roman Navy.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, the missing half, a monument in ruins.
When you look at the Colosseum today, taking in all those iconic, jagged edges and the completely exposed interior, you really have to ask yourself, why is half of the building just missing? Well, it wasn't a conquering army that took it down. The answer actually comes down to geology and a very specific year, 1349. Remember how Vespasian built this whole thing over Nero's drained artificial lake? Because the southern half of the Colosseum was resting on that softer and much more unstable lake sediment, a massive earthquake in 1349 caused the entire outer southern wall to just violently shear off and collapse into a massive heap of rubble.
And after that collapse, all those incredibly valuable travertine stones didn't just sit there. For centuries, the ruins were basically treated like a giant stone quarry. The materials were used to build the palaces and churches of Renaissance Rome. They even used pieces of it for St. Peter's Basilica. Over the years, it also served as a medieval fortress and even a shelter. Honestly, the only reason the northern half is still standing today is because later popes thankfully stepped in to protect it, basically using that giant, sturdy wall as a dramatic, monumental backdrop for their religious processions. So our journey today reveals something pretty profound. The Colosseum is this stunning testament to both Roman engineering genius and incredibly calculated cruelty. It was a machine designed from the ground up to control a population through distraction and blood. And it leaves us with a really provocative thought to end on. Do the broken, jagged walls of the Colosseum perfectly reflect the ultimate fate of all empires? No matter how monumental the architecture, power itself is always temporary. Thank you so much